Unsung Murder Ballads discusses topics of a graphic nature and in graphic detail and may not be suitable for children under the age of 13. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to, I believe this is episode 9 of Unsung Murder Ballads. I am Janus Dead.
And I'm Joyous Dead.
Isn't it exciting to have a deadcore name?
It's so cool. I feel so included.
Well, it's funny. We were talking about it last week because Aaron is now the only one without a deadcore name.
I just want to be included, even if I only listen to the band with you.
Yeah, but it's all good. You've seen them twice. You've hung out with them. You've hung out with them at a bar with the Darkness. I mean, come on. Life doesn't get much cooler than that.
I'm as real a fan as anyone.
Right. I mean, it's so much fun. I love them. And I actually did reach out to Metadead, the singer, songwriter, guitarist of the Dead Deads. And she and I are now working on a time and day where we can get together on the podcast and discuss the history of murder ballads, as well as her talking about her song Murder Ballad, which is the opening guitar riff of every episode.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm actually really excited for that. Murder ballads are very cool. I'm a big fan of like a country murder ballad. I feel like angry country women yelling about like murdering their husband is just a fantastic genre of song.
And exactly. And that's what we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss the history of the murder ballad, plus the 3 different murder ballad songs that Metadead wrote for the Dead Deads, because there's Murder Ballad 2, which she did with Corey Taylor of Slipknot and Stone Sour.
Oh, sick.
And then there's the Murder Reprise, which is this weird musical / Disney-fied version of a song. Both of those are on their newest album, Tell Your Girls It's All Right. So you can listen to those on Spotify right now. So I love the album. It's probably their best album. I still have a soft spot for their second album, which was For Your Obliteration, as well as their first album, Rainbow. But the newest one, Tell Your Girls Is All Right, is probably my favorite album of all time. I absolutely love it. So,
oh, well, I'm absolutely gonna go listen to Murder Ballad later. So hell yeah.
And I actually, since the last time we talked, I have listened to the musical 6 all the way through.
And what were your thoughts?
Well, I can tell you why I didn't really get into it initially is that opening song was terrible.
Yeah, it's not all strong.
No, but the fact that it's the opener, I think I tried listening to it twice and couldn't get past the opening song and I stopped it. But after our last podcast, I decided just skip that song.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually did find it enjoyable, although somewhat historically inaccurate.
That was very interesting to listen to. I went back and listened to the soundtrack and was like, none of this matches up. It doesn't match up to what Janus Dead said about this.
Right. And I think you said it, that there was a fun song for Anna Cleves, and that was probably the most fun.
Yes, it was so fun.
Yeah, the German and the house of that. What was it? The house of
Holbein.
Holbein. I couldn't remember his name for some reason. Yeah, that was so much fun, and I did enjoy that part. And I thought the ending was a little weird.
Yeah, they tried to send a message with something that should have just been a story.
Yeah,
I think it was a little forced.
Yeah, they were like, if we were feminist and living today, we could have done this. But no, you weren't. You lived in the 1500s, and that's not how it worked then.
Yeah, it just feels like a little too like faux Yas queen. And I was like, can we be a little realistic? But maybe that's just because I'm cynical.
Maybe, but it's also, I mean, I don't know. It was heavy-handed more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they didn't know how to end it, and that was too bad.
Yeah.
But then realistically, how do you end that when you're telling a true story that most of them didn't have happy endings for?
Very true. Very true. You have to pick something.
Yeah, and so it was an interesting take. So I did get to do that, and that was a lot of fun. But we also had a comment on the Instagram page that after the first episode of the Tudor Dynasty one that said, really enjoyed this episode and am now listening to the 6 soundtrack. So thanks for that.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
It's pretty funny. All right. So this week, this is by request. This is coming in from through our Instagram, Millennium Angel. They're from Australia. So, hey, thanks for listening down under. That's really awesome. And they said that they immediately thought of three cases they would like us to discuss because they're from the city of Adelaide, and that's where these crimes took place. And the three they recommended were the family murders, which I still have to research. I don't know anything about that one. Snowtown, which is probably the most famous of the three, and the Beaumont Children, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So this
Okay,
is
Adelaide, absolute murder capital, sounding like if there's this many from one place.
so it's funny that you say that. Adelaide is considered the murder capital of Australia, or
Okay.
at least that's what somebody called it, because realistically, the murder rate there is not any higher than anywhere else in Australia.
Interesting.
Yep. So you know
Perhaps
me,
just like more, I guess, more famous cases or more
the
prominent.
there were a lot of famous high profile cases that all happened roughly in the same maybe 15 to 20-year window that
Mm-hmm.
kind of just really put a black mark, gave this whole city a black eye. And the
That's tough.
Snowtown,
Yeah.
yeah, the Snowtown one's the worst. And like I said, I'll probably cover that one later. But because it's so famous, I'm sort of holding off on doing that one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that was Adelaide. Now to keep, I'm gonna, so you know me, when I do research, I can't help but to go down the rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
The murder rate in Adelaide is like 0.89 murders per every 100,000 people.
Is that like
So
per year?
per year, yeah, that's the
Okay.
average. So keep in mind that's for 100,000 people, that's less than a person. With that said, I'm gonna talk about the United States first.
I was gonna say, like, please tell me what it is in St. Louis, because isn't that that's the worst in the US, right?
No, it is not.
Oh, well, we're learning things today. Okay.
Let me rephrase. You are correct in the sense that as of 2023, the first 4 months of 2023, St. Louis is the murder capital of the U.S. as of right now this year. It
Okay.
for the first 4 months, they've had almost 70 murders, 69.4 per 100, whatever it might be. So with Baltimore at number two, New Orleans at number three, and Detroit at number four. But for 2022, Chicago was the murder capital of the United States.
And that's per capita, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Then followed by Philadelphia, then New York City, then Houston, then Los Angeles. Now for the world, and this is get and take a guess where you think the murder capital of the world is. Country wise,
Oh,
not city, country.
country? That's tough.
It
I
is.
feel like
And
I would put the US way up there, but I don't know if it's the worst or if it just seems the worst to us in our high tower clutching our pearls.
well, I can tell you the US has a murder rate of 6.52 per 100,000 people, putting us at number 28th in the world.
Whoa.
Yeah,
I guess we just got a lot more gun murder and other
prob-
people are switching it up.
probably, yes. So,
Interesting.
do you want to take another shot or do you want me to just tell you?
Russia?
No, amazingly. So it's funny. I have this thing in front of me where I can just hover over the country and it'll tell me. So as you're guessing, Russia is number 26 in the
Oh,
world at 7.33 per 100,000 people. I actually tried to find information on the Ukraine, but unfortunately, because it's considered war, I don't think it's listing murder. So their stats don't even show up when you hover over Ukraine,
yeah, for some
unfortunately.
reason they don't call war murder, you know.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess not.
If not, then the US would be the murder capital of the world, historically, probably.
Probably.
We
So
would
the,
we would be up there.
So the number one country for murder in the world is Jamaica
Whoa.
at 44.95 people per
Whoa.
100,000 people. With
That's a lot.
right now Honduras is the second highest at 36.33 per 100,000 people, and South Africa is number 3 at 33.46 people per 100,000 people. However, they're number 1 for females being murder victims.
Whoa.
Right. So, and this is cool that the site that I'm on, it's wisevoter.com/country dash rankings slash murder rate by country.
Huh.
And what it does is you hover over the thing and it tells you. So like right now I'm looking at South Africa and they talk about male murder rate is 64.1 people per 100,000. But women, they're number 1 at 9.46. So they're still killing more men than they are women. But in
Hmm.
terms of the overall world where, women are murder victims, they're the highest at 9.46. And for some reason, I thought that was going to be higher.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of surprised, just surprised in that like it's so much higher the rate for male murder than female murder. Like that surprises me, but then I guess like I think highly from a context of like intimate partner violence, whereas there's lots of other ways that you get murdered, and that
Right.
makes sense.
I mean, luckily it's still considered a murder, so I'm assuming those numbers are included in here.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And it's interesting. I'm going to use that as the segue. One of the problems with Adelaide, Australia, is that the domestic violence rate is so high there that that's another contributing factor to their murder rate.
Well, yep, that does often escalate.
Yes. So that's what brings us basically here is that, Adelaide has this reputation,
Hmm.
and the Beaumont children certainly don't help that particular story. I'm assuming you haven't heard anything about this.
Nope, never a word.
Yeah, I had before 2 weeks ago. I had never heard of this either. So this was very eye opening for me, and it's also very similar to the Molly Bish case, unfortunately.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, it's similar. We'll get there, but one of the things that surprised me most about the Molly Bish case is the thing that surprises me the most here. But we'll get there.
Okay.
So the Beaumont children, you had Jane Beaumont, who was born on September 10th, 1956. Her younger, and she was in 1966 when this takes place. She is 9 years old. You had Arna Beaumont, Arna, Arnna, Arna Beaumont. She was only 7 when this happened, and Grant was only 4, their youngest brother. They lived with their parents, Grant Beaumont, who went by Jim. He was a former serviceman and he was a driver for a taxi company, and their mother, Nancy, and they had married in December of 1955. Their house was at 109 Harding Street in Somerton Park, a suburb of Adelaide, South Australia. And it wasn't too far from a place called Glenelg Beach. It was a popular spot for kids and anyone else who's basically out having fun in the summer heat. That particular year was kind of a heat wave. And it's funny because when I'm watching it, they're using, they're using, I think, Celsius, and we're typically using Fahrenheit. I think that's what.
Hmm.
So when they keep talking about how hot it is, I'm like, I really don't know how hot that is. But from what I gathered, it was well over 100 degrees, so everyone was hot and they're all going to the beach.
Hmm.
So on January 25th of that year, keep in mind it's Australia, so it's summer
Right,
for
right,
them,
right.
because that was another thing I had to kind of do a double take on. Uh,
Yep, yep, yep.
so they're in the middle of a summer heat wave, and Jim, their father, drops the 3 kids off at Glenelg Beach, and he goes off to work. And the kids kind of spend the day on the beach having fun, and they take the bus home that evening, thus kind of proving to them that with Jane, the responsible 9-year-old, kind of in charge, they can get to and from the beach without any problems. Now, this does need to be said that there's a big difference between the 1960s here in the US and the 1960s in, Australia. They were really like still in a very successful place after World War II. They were doing well. Everybody was friendly. There was really no concerns about any kind of child violence. Does that make sense?
I feel like even in this era, people are less concerned about that too in the US.
Maybe. I mean, this is for in the US, this is the mid 60s. So serial killers are kind of just ramping up.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think, Manson's not going to happen for a couple more years. So it's, yeah, maybe it was still a little bit of an innocent time for us, but they weren't having that big hippie movement that we were having.
That's true. People definitely feared that around their kids.
Right. Back down there, I would say it was more like, a surfer culture with like the Beach Boys and that kind of thing in Australia,
Hmm.
where we are dealing with the hippie movement, which not that there's anything wrong with that. There isn't, but it was a different thing. And here they were afraid of the hippie culture for some reason, probably the LSD.
To be fair, if that's something to be scared of.
No, yeah, it wasn't, well, everything in moderation.
Indeed. And
I've never done it because I'm afraid I'm really going to like it. So that's why I've avoided it.
you know what? I did it and I kind of hated it. So,
I can see again. I think that's why I don't want to try it is because when I don't like something, I want it to stop. And something like that, you can't make stop.
it does not stop for so long. It is, that's it. I was like, this is so unpleasant, and this is the next 18 hours of my life. It was so not a good time.
Yeah, it sounds like being sick is what it sounds like to me.
Yes, but I know a lot of people who really love it, so
Yeah, I mean, yeah, more
each
power
his
to
own.
you. Yeah, just don't hurt anybody.
Amen.
Right. So on the next day, which was the morning of January 26th, 1966, it was Australia Day. And then that's kind of the national holiday for when the ships first arrived to kind of help settle and build up the area. So it's like a
Okay.
national holiday. And the kids, of course, asked if they could return to the beach, but their father was already at work, so he couldn't drive them. And they sort of talked their mother into letting them take the bus. Now, it was too hot for them to walk or take their bike. So their mother, Nancy, gave them money. She gave them 6 shillings and 6 pence, which, I'm not familiar with the English money system. Doesn't sound like a lot to me, but it basically was enough for the bus for all three and some lunch for all three. So,
Hmm.
so the kids catch the 8:45 a.m. bus, and they were expected to be home on the noon bus. When noon came around and they didn't get off the bus, Nancy was annoyed, but thought, okay, maybe they missed the bus. So she continues to go about her chores and does whatever she needs to do. But then the kids don't get off the 2 o'clock bus either. So now she's
Gotcha.
kind of panicking, but she doesn't have a vehicle because, Jim, the father, is at work. And she also doesn't want to leave the house and then have the kids come home from a different route.
Right, for sure.
So she decides to just wait. And Jim returns from his trip early at 3 o'clock. And he immediately, upon hearing that the kids aren't home, he drives to the beach, leaving Nancy at home again in case they're going and they take two different routes. When he's unable to find the kids at the beach, he then goes back home, grabs Nancy, and the two of them go out and start searching. They're stopping at friends' houses. They're talking to everybody. I'm assuming they didn't have a phone if they're not calling people.
Right, yeah.
Again, I don't know what 1966 Australia was like. But basically, after not being able to find the kids, at 5:30, they went into the Glenelg police station to report the kids' disappearance. Unlike almost every other story we do, the police took quick action.
Okay, go off, Australia. Love that for you.
Right? So they organized the search of the beach and the adjacent areas. And they were initially basing the assumption off that they must have been nearby and lost track of time. So when they didn't find them in the immediate areas, they started expanding out. They went to a place called the Sand Hills, which is kind of a more private part of the beach where people may be doing drugs and things like that. They actually searched the ocean. They went into nearby buildings. There was an airport nearby, rail lines, interstate roads. They were checking everywhere. And of
Wow.
course, yeah, it was amazing. And of course, they're afraid of an accident. They're not really thinking kidnapping at this point. However, they find nothing. The next day, it was all over national news that these three kids went missing. Yeah, the very next day.
Wow. It's just kind of that's impressive.
It is crazy.
We've definitely not been hearing that in recent cases.
Some of them, it depends. And that's another debate. When you think about like the Gabby Petito case, you know,
True. I mean, like the cases that we've been talking about on the show.
okay. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, no, you're right that now it spreads really fast because of the nature of the internet, but when
Well,
something spreads,
I thought you were
you
going
know,
to say that we don't hear about it too often. We do, but only certain cases because there's a lot more cases. And that's that. I'm sure you saw the criticism of why Gabby Petito is so covered and so many.
yeah, naturally.
Yeah. So that was tough. But unfortunately, not, they really couldn't find anything. They had all these people out there searching. They couldn't find anything. And then within a few days, the Adelaide Sunday Mail, which is their like newspaper, actually put out a headline that said sex crime now feared, even though there was absolutely no reason to have done so.
Oh, that's yeah.
And of course, that highlighted the evolving fear that everyone was like kind of coming to, and now everyone's worried
Hmm.
about an abductor and a murderer. Another interesting thing that happened that day is there was a witness that came forward and said she thought she saw the children playing in a place called, and I am probably going to butcher this name, the Patawalonga Boat Haven. And as a result of that, people were afraid that the children may have fallen into the water. Now, to picture this, to kind of, I got to set the stage here. You have the ocean, and then there's this kind of inlet that comes in, and that's where everyone was like docking their boats.
Mm-hmm.
So they drained the entire inlet.
Oh my God.
They pumped, and there's footage of this on the internet. They pumped all the water out of there. And then all these cadets, like police cadets and everybody, they're walking through what used to be where people were keeping their boats. They're like, waist high in mud using sticks. And they are like forcing their way through the mud and like
Like
poking
expecting
down. They don't
don't
know
we
what to
go?
expect.
I don't know. I feel like usually we find bodies, and this is morbid, but like I feel like usually they float.
Well, yeah, but if they're weighed down, again, we
That's
don't.
true.
But they drained it, and then watching the video footage of these men going through that mud was crazy to watch, and the
Oh,
fact that so many people were doing it.
yeah, like the sparing no expense. It's like a really you see a community coming together, and that's
Ex-
impressive.
which is funny because I said that to someone while I was watching the video. I said, you know, I don't know that you would see that here in the US today. If three middle class or lower children went missing, would they really inconvenience the rich to drain the water out of where they park their boats?
No, they wouldn't.
Yeah, and we were joking about it, but it's probably true. They probably wouldn't.
Hmm.
So not only did they do that, but they started going everywhere. Like they were draining anything that had an opening they could have fallen into or crawled into. They were draining that with water, flushing it out, searching every little nook and cranny. And there's all these videos online of the news reporters asking, what do you think you're going to find? Do you think you're going to find their bodies in there? And the police are trying not to say anything. So
Right.
this literally became the largest missing persons search in Australian history.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Let's see. So we also have some other witnesses. So they found some people said they saw the children go to a place called the Collie Reserve, which is near the beach. And you get to kind of picture it's almost like a park within walking distance of the beach. There's like a gazebo, and so kids go there or whomever goes there, and they just can hang out and play. The kids had been seen there, and they were seen with a man that was described as tall, with fair to light brown hair and a thin face in his mid 30s. He was also suntanned, and he had a thin to athletic build. And he was wearing, according to witnesses, he was wearing swim trunks that were black, kind of Speedo swim trunks that were
Hmm.
black with blue stripes. Now,
In the middle of a park, he's wearing a Speedo.
correct, but they're near the beach.
Okay, fair enough.
It's like crossing the street.
Okay.
So the kids are there playing, and he's playing with them. And the kids are interacting as if they know the guy. They have zero problems interacting with him.
Hmm.
And at one point, the man even approaches one of the people that have come forward as a witness, asking if he had seen anyone near the kids' belongings because their money was missing.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's weird.
a little bit. Yeah. And it's one of those things that, like, you got to wonder if he's setting the stage for this very thing. Kind of like, well, we saw him with a guy, but he was friendly and he was checking on their money, like he seemed like he was helping them, kind of thing.
Yeah, trying to give like almost an alibi.
But of course, once they go missing, he's suddenly a suspect. So his
Of
efforts
course.
kind of backfire.
Yeah. If that was what he was trying to do, it wasn't really the smartest.
At some point, the man, according to the witnesses, the man goes off to the changing room to change, and the children waited for him. Then they were all seen walking away together from the beach, which the witnesses estimated must have been around about 12:15. Now, my take on this is that this guy probably stole their money
Mm-hmm.
because now they have no way to get home and they have to
Mm-hmm.
rely on him.
Yep. That makes sense.
Yeah, that was my first thought when I was like watching this and listening to it. Because unfortunately, I didn't have time to actually find a book and read it. Although there is a book called The Satin Man, which I have
Mm-hmm.
every intention of buying and reading, which is about this case. Basically, now we talk about the Beaumont parents, and when they hear about their children with this guy, they basically say that their kids are kind of shy, especially the oldest one, Jane. She knows better than to hang out with a stranger, than to talk to strangers. She's smart enough to see something's out of character, which
Mm-hmm.
is why now, or now, but as investigators dig into this and they hear that they're playing with this man, it's believed that they knew him. Whether he knew their family or not is unknown. Whether or
Mm-hmm.
not he had befriended them the day before at the beach, it's kind of hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
But her parents are like, there's absolutely no way they would have done that if they weren't comfortable with this guy. So how does that even happen?
Yeah.
And then Nancy later remembers a comment that the younger daughter, Arna, had said at home, said something along the lines of, well, Jane's got a boyfriend down at the beach.
Ooh.
But her mother kind of dismissed it because one, she thought that she was referring to a little boy. And two, she didn't really take it too seriously because she's 9 years old.
Right, and she's shy, so it seems like just like siblings teasing each other.
Possibly. But of course, it looks a lot darker in hindsight after they
Mm-hmm.
disappear.
Yeah, it certainly does.
So after that, the next reported sighting of the kids is from a shopkeeper at a nearby bakery called Wenzel's Bakery. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, the kids had gone in. All three kids went in, and they bought some pastries, and they bought a meat pie, and they paid for it with a £1 note.
And they didn't have any pounds.
Correct. They only had the coins that the mother had given them, which I don't really know the difference between how much 6 pence and 3 shillings was, whatever it was. I don't know what that actual value is compared to pounds.
I
And
know it's
I'm
less than pounds.
well, I'm not picturing like a single pound at that point in time being like maybe a $10 bill.
Right, that would make sense.
So, but either way, the police viewed this as further evidence that they had been with someone else because one, here they are with a pound note, and they while they go into that shop normally and get the little snacks that they get, but this time they purchased a meat pie. And in one of the recordings, one of the reports I saw, which was from a news source from Australia from 2018, they said that the kid said, "We need a pie for the man."
Hmm.
So
And so you said that they like go here regularly, so the baker actually knew it was those kids.
correct. They go there, like that's kind of their stop as they're about to catch the bus. They leave the
Mm-hmm.
beach, they go to the shop, they buy some sweets, they get on the bus, they go home. That's the norm from everything I've
Gotcha.
heard.
Okay. So we
So
definitely know it's them.
correct. We that's the last like corroborated sighting. Like they were able to, kind of compare notes enough and these people knew who these kids were. This is the last known sighting of them that they can
Mm-hmm.
100% say actually happened. So, according to another statement, someone had seen the children walking alone around 3 p.m. away from the beach along what's called Jetty Road, which is in the general direction of where they live. The witness was a postman, and he knew the children well, and the police kind of considered his statement reliable. And he said the children were holding hands and laughing and just walking down the street. Now, the police, I mean, obviously, when you think about the reliability of this, they're wondering why the kids are laughing and holding hands when they must have known that they were at least an hour late. And now they're
Right,
strolling around
yeah.
unconcerned. So there's some like maybe this guy's not 100% accurate. And it did take that postman 2 days to come forward and give that statement. So they're
Right, when
saying,
this insane search has already been initiated.
correct. And the fact that, after 2 days, maybe he's remembering from 3 days ago instead of just one day.
Right, that would make more sense, yeah.
So then there was one other person, a local resident named Daphne Gregory, and she said that she saw the kids around 3 o'clock the same day. And she said that she saw them with a 6 foot man between the ages of 30 to 35 who had light brown hair, parted noticeably on his left, that he had high cheekbones, and he kind of was reddened, like his almost sunburned. He was so tan with a
Mm-hmm.
medium build. So, yeah, so this is now two sightings, and both descriptions kind of line up for what this guy looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And she also said that he was carrying one of those airline bags. You did picture the 60s with flight attendants. They had this little, almost like a satchel, like a purse, and they carried
Mm-hmm.
their things in. And that was actually something known to the people that knew them, that Jane, the 9-year-old, was known to carry like their beach equipment in, like their.
Oh, okay.
So after that, unfortunately, it goes cold for quite a bit. It's several months later that a woman comes forward and reports that on the night of the disappearance, a man accompanied by two girls and a boy entered a neighboring house that she thought had been empty.
Hmm.
Later, she said she had seen the boy walking alone down a lane where he was pursued and caught roughly by the man. Like the guy just kind of snatched him back.
Oh.
The next morning, however, the house was like appeared deserted again, and she never saw the man or the children after that. So the police unfortunately could not establish why she failed. One, they couldn't figure out why she failed to report the information like right away,
Right.
and they couldn't find any evidence or anything. So it's kind of weird. Like, would you
Yeah.
just one day
It,
have a fucking dream?
yeah, literally.
Obviously, not only was this hitting national attention, but now it had hit international attention.
Mm-hmm.
And on November 8th of 1966, a man by the name of Gerard Crosset, I'm going to assume it's Crosset, it might be Crosset, a Dutch psychic, came to
Hmm.
Australia to assist in the
Okay.
search, causing quite the media frenzy. Now,
Yeah, for sure.
the funny thing about this is there's one report that talks about how he had initially contacted them and said that he was having visions of the children like crossing into something and getting stuck or something like that. And police were kind of like, yeah, okay, we've already done our searching. And then somehow it was leaked to the media that the police were paying this guy to come from Holland to Australia.
Huh.
And the police were like, well, that's news to us, but well, since it's reported, I guess we'll pay for him to come out. and, and they
Wow,
did.
that's not how you would expect it to go.
Not at all. And which is even funnier because if the Crosset guy or Crosset, I don't know how to pronounce it. If he was the one that planted that in the media, it was brilliant on his part.
Yeah, excellent move, Mr. Psychic. You're doing great work. You at least know how to manipulate your way to a job. So excellent work.
Right. And so, well, here's the funny part is he lands and immediately tells the press that he's not going to take any money for his work while he's there,
Huh.
which was weird. Yeah. So he's not looking for money for it. He's just looking for fame, I'm assuming. And he claimed that he had helped find other missing and murdered people, even though there's no real evidence to substantiate that.
Interesting.
He started basically going about the city, and of course the media is following him, and he goes to the beach where the kids were last seen, and eventually he ends up at a warehouse near the children's home. And when he goes in, he sees that they've basically redone the entire floor of this place. It has just recently been renovated with fresh concrete, and he just starts
Mhm.
declaring that this is where the children are buried.
Huh. That
Yeah.
is really weird.
Well, it is definitely coincidental, but the police and the property owners were kind of like, no, this place was really not, this place was thoroughly inspected before we put this concrete down. So there's
Right.
no
Like it
way the
wasn't like done
children
in the
are
middle of the
here.
night. Like,
Right. So they initially didn't do anything with it. But eventually they kind of bowed to public pressure because the publicity raised $40,000 to
ooh.
have this thing torn up and whatever. And of course, they found nothing.
I was gonna say, I know now there's technology that could do that.
The
Like you can
ground
almost like,
penetrating, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because we're going to be touching on that again soon.
Oh, who's the psychic? It's me.
Yes, you and I need to go to Adelaide so you can help figure this out
Yes, I'll get it. Well,
after all these years. Okay, it's been what, 60 years now?
yeah. Oh well, spoiler,
Yeah.
unsolved, huh?
Yeah. So, yeah, well, yeah, I mean it's funny because we're doing it because it's a recommendation, but at the same time because we're not 100% sure they were murdered, although let's be honest, they were probably murdered. I
Mm-hmm.
might have skipped over this one under most circumstances because there are no bodies, but yeah, it is still unsolved.
Wow.
So now, 2 years after their disappearance, their parents received letters in the mail. The first one was written supposedly by Jane.
Oh.
Yeah. Basically telling them that they were living well and they were being treated well. And yeah, it was really fucked up. And the
Yeah,
second
that's
one,
really fucked up. I feel like,
mm,
yeah, where the hell did that come from?
the second one was written by a man who said that he was keeping the children.
Oof.
Yeah, and the envelopes were both postmarked from a city called Dandenong, Victoria in Australia.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, and the basically from what I've seen, they're just the letters are described as relatively pleasant, and even the girls refer to him as the man who was like quote unquote the man every time they refer to him in the
Mm-hmm.
letter. So at the time, the police thought the letters could be authentic,
Or yeah, right.
especially
They could be from a fucked up fan or whatever. Like
right.
people are so weird about that.
Yeah, it's just really bizarre. Like I think who does that to people? It just blows my mind. Like these poor parents, you know.
Yeah, that's so awful.
But the man claimed that he had appointed himself guardian of the children and was willing to hand them back to their parents. And then he specified a meeting place. Of course, they had to follow his instructions for doing so.
Naturally.
So when the parents went, they were followed by a detective. They drove to the designated place at the right time, but nobody showed up. And later, at some point, they received a third letter, also supposedly from Jane, stating that the man had realized that there was a detective following them, and
Oof.
he decided to keep the children because they didn't trust him and he had betrayed them. They had betrayed him.
Oof.
Yep.
That feels awful for
Yep.
them.
Can
Like
you yeah, can you
just
imagine?
trying to make the best choice and oh, it sucks.
Yep. And after that, no more letters came in. Yeah. Now it's funny because that makes me think of there are cases where people have gone missing and they do that like they'll have people reach out saying there was one case and I can't remember the person's name. She went missing in one of the Caribbean islands and they were started receiving letters and someone was like, I can help get your daughter out. She's being sex trafficked, she's here, da 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 da. And they raised all this money and they sent it to him just to find out it was a complete hoax.
Oh, just an absolute scam.
Yeah, they just took them for as much
Ugh,
money as they could. Apparently,
that's
that's
so
not
fucking awful.
uncommon. Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, vulnerable people are the ones who get exploited, so it makes sense. Like that's as vulnerable as you can get.
Yeah, that's true. And realistically, if your kid was missing, you would take any chance you could. Yeah,
Absolutely, you would.
yeah. So that is really sad that we have those kind of predators who are almost as bad as the people that take the kids.
Literally.
But in 1992, new forensics examinations showed that the letters were a hoax. There was fingerprint technology that had improved, and they were able to identify the person who wrote the letters.
That's crazy though.
Yeah, right. At the time that they figured this out, the guy was 41, but he was a teenager at the time when he had written the letters, and he said he wrote them as a joke.
I
Yeah.
hope there were consequences, but I feel like that's not illegal.
Well, it is illegal, but unfortunately, there is a statute of limitations on that kind of thing.
Damn. What law what like law is that breaking? Like what's that crime?
I don't know. I mean, and it's also Australia, so.
True. I guess yeah.
But yeah, who knows? I mean, yeah, I guess harassment. I
Yeah,
mean,
probably harassment. Yeah, that would make sense.
so in November of 2013, now this is something else I saw on this awesome news thing. You can find this on YouTube as well. But this one news channel decided that it was going to kind of start digging deep again. And in 2013, there was an excavation in the back of a place called the North Plimpton Factory. And that was because there was a possible suspect that his name had come up, and his name was Harry Phipps. And we're going to get into all the suspects once I'm done. Kind of, well, actually, we're going to get into them pretty soon. But they went in and they basically found these two men had come forward, and they said that Harry Phipps had paid them money to dig a huge hole on the grounds of his factory.
Yeah, that's sus.
Yeah, they were teenagers at the time. They needed the money. He literally sat there in his car watching them dig. And when they were done, he basically told them to go fuck themselves and paid them and told them never to
Mm-hmm.
talk about it again. So in 2013, as they bring them, they're trying to figure out where it was on the property, and they excavated this whole area, but nothing was found.
Hmm.
Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, when this news reporter starts digging into it again in 2018, they realized, talking to these men again, that once they started walking the grounds further in, they realized that the way this factory looked in 1966 did not look the way it did in 2013 when they did this first excavation. And they realized they were actually further in on the property than they had initially thought. So after some kind of reconnaissance, they figure out an area and they come in with ground penetrating radar.
Gotcha. All right, nice.
Yep. And they figure out that there is an area that had been kind of dug up and there is some anomalies inside the ground. Unfortunately, once they dug it up, they found animal bones and trash. I know. I was so hoping when I was like watching this news report, I was like, come on, please let this have an ending.
Animal bones. Ugh.
Yeah, animal bones.
Someone like buried their dog. Maybe weird.
It is weird. And my thought is, at this point, I mean, it's been so long. Maybe they don't want to spend the money, but I would just keep excavating places in that factory.
Right, yeah.
I mean, unless he really did just do that to bury animal bones. It's just weird.
It's weird behavior for sure.
But we are now going to get into some of the suspects.
All right, let's go.
All right, the first person, his name is Bevan Spencer von Einem or Einem.
Okay.
He was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1984 for murdering a 15-year-old, Richard Kelvin. So basically, he was the son of someone who was part of a newspaper, or maybe owned the newspaper, and this guy killed his son.
That's messed up. All right.
So the police and prosecutors publicly stated that they believed von Einem had accomplices and possibly involved in other murders besides Richard Kelvin. About this time, police came to suspect that he possibly had an involvement in the Beaumont case. Unfortunately, no accomplices were ever charged, and von Einem refused to cooperate with investigators about any possible connections with other murders besides the one he had been convicted of. But during the investigation into von Einem, police heard from an informant that's only known as Mr. B. Now, Mr. B relates an alleged conversation between himself and von Ivan, where he boasted having taken 3 children from a beach several years earlier, and that he had brought them home to conduct experiments on them.
Oh.
Von Iman had said that he had performed brilliant surgery on each of them and had them, quote, connected up.
Right. This sounds like Human Centipede, and I hate that.
That's what I was thinking too.
Oh.
Yeah, it's gross. But one of the
children. Oh, it's even worse. I mean, I watched that movie, Morbid Curiosity, but
yeah, same here. Yeah. But he said that one of the children had supposedly died during this procedure, so he had to kill the other 2 and dump the bodies in the bushland south of Adelaide. So yeah,
that's awfully specific.
Well, unfortunately, nothing was ever found. If there's no information as to whether or not they went and searched the bushland, but from what I understand about the quote unquote bushland, this isn't easy to traverse, and it would be even harder to like search for bodies. I mean, it would be like, sense. Yeah, it would be like not a wooded, but it'd be like going, if I just told you, yeah, I buried them in the desert outside Vegas. You're like, good luck finding them.
Right. Yeah.
Now, the police had not previously considered von Einem in connection with the Beaumont children, but he did somewhat resemble the descriptions from 1966. So, yeah. But according to Detective Bob O'Brien, Mr. B gave important information during the investigation into the Kelvin murder, and he was generally regarded as a reliable source. But the alleged confession was mixed. Their reception to it, the police they weren't kind of buying it. But they did think there was enough plausible details to warrant further research. Other details relayed by Mr. B did not exactly fit the facts. So that's where their skepticism kind of came in. Although, he still hasn't 100% been ruled out.
I mean, yeah, like boasting about something so specific.
It's a little weird, yeah. I mean,
and it's like there can't be, I'm considering since this profile, like this case ended up being so high profile, there can't have been many of them. So there can't have been many instances of children being kidnapped and like
Right.
especially free at the beach. It's just so specific.
It is very specific, but I think about this now. If you're a guy who just got put in jail for murdering a 15-year-old boy, you probably are worried about your safety, and therefore you want to make yourself sound tougher having killed more people.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, here in the US, children killers are generally not treated well in prison. So
Yeah, you don't necessarily want to be sharing that.
yeah, so it's tough to say. I think he may have just been boasting. He's not my favorite candidate. I'm gonna say that
Okay,
now. He's not my favorite. I saved my favorite one for last.
always.
So, however, von Einen was known to frequent the Glenelg Beach to quote unquote perv on the changing rooms, and he was described as being preoccupied with children, although he does deny any involvement in the Beaumont cases. However, with that, he is also younger in 1966, being in his early
Mm-hmm.
20s, whereas everyone's describing this guy as being in his 30s.
Yeah, that's fair.
And the other important distinction is that he was convicted of murdering a 15-year-old boy and was suspected of killing other men in their teens and 20s,
Mm.
where the Beaumont children don't exactly line up with his kind of MO.
Mm-hmm.
So, with all of that, all those disparities, it's kind of, especially if you're talking about serial killers, generally their MOs don't change that much. Not,
Mm-hmm.
not that it's, it's obviously possible, but so as the police kept looking into it, another thing, the reference to all the surgical experimentation that von Einen claimed he made, that little confession he made to Mr. B, apparently that corresponded to some coroner's report for several other murdered youths.
Oh,
Yeah, so he may be telling the truth about what he did to someone, but it may not have been those children.
that's awful. I mean, awful for whatever children that was. That's
Yeah. Well, and so there's another famous crime that happened at this time where two girls went missing from a place called the Adelaide Oval, which is a soccer place or football down there. He von Einen told some witnesses, like he told people that he had taken two girls from that oval stadium and that he had killed them, but he didn't elaborate any further. And
oof.
and again, this is one of those things that goes back to the Molly Bish case. He did also sort of look like the sketches from both the Beaumont children and the Oval cases.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, but again, what I'm learning is people really all look alike.
People do, and like people's memory of what a person looks like is not strong.
No, no, and that's a good point. Like eyewitness testimony is very unreliable.
Unreliable, and also like even a face I know well. Like if we went to the police station and they told me to like describe what your face is so that they could make a reproducible like drawing, I don't
Right.
even know where to start.
It's hard. Yeah. Like as I exactly like I could think maybe I could describe you, but like when I see some of these police sketches, I'm like, man, they really hired like Michelangelo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. But an interesting note here, in August of 2007, it was reported that police were examining some of the archival footage from the original Beaumont search when they were there. Everyone was out searching for the young children. And there is a young man that resembles von Einen within the group of onlookers.
Hmm.
And in the news report that I watched, they actually show that footage and kind of focus in on that one person. And it does look creepily like this guy. But
That's wild. Like I said, showing up to the investigation.
right, which
Yeah.
makes sense. However, the problem is this same guy could have been some of these other people we're about to talk about
Mm-hmm.
because they all essentially look the same.
Just
And
some weird freaking dudes.
yeah, it's well again, I go back to the Molly Bish case. There were so many. Like I posted, I think 4 photos of men and the sketch on the Instagram page, and they all look like this guy.
Yeah.
And after that kind of came out that they saw the person who looked like him for the onlookers, they did ask the public to come forward with information to help identify who that guy in the video footage was, but it didn't go anywhere else.
Hmm.
So our next suspect, this guy is named Arthur Stanley Brown. He was charged in 1998 with the murders of sisters Judith and Susan McKay of Townsville, Queensland. They had disappeared on their way to school on August 26, 1970, and their bodies were found several days later in a dry creek bed. Both girls had been strangled. Brown's his trial in 2000 was delayed after his lawyer applied for a Section 613 verdict, which basically meant that he was unfit to be tried.
Gotcha.
He basically was never retried for the case because he was found to have dementia and Alzheimer's disease.
Wait, so he was tried almost
So
30 years later?
yeah, so he was arrested. So let me go back a little bit. He was arrested in 1998 and for the disappearance and murder of the girls that in 1970.
Huh.
Right, but in trial, he was found to be unfit for trial because of dementia and Alzheimer's disease.
Interesting.
Yeah, unfortunately, he died in 2002. Now,
Hmm.
yeah, and again, it's one of those situations. He looked like the suspect in both cases. There was tough to find a connection between him and the Beaumonts because he had no employment records, so they couldn't say, okay, he was working here, he was working there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really tough because he couldn't even remember where he was.
Yeah, I mean, definitely tough to have an alibi or otherwise. Yeah.
Right. But apparently, wherever they were keeping the records at that time, there was a flood in Brisbane in 1974, and that destroyed most of like their actual on-hand records because it's obviously
Oh no.
pre-computer. So
Yeah.
anything that would have shown his movement was lost. Possible that he had unrestricted access to that building and may have destroyed the files on purpose.
There's possibility. Anything's
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. But it's basically they kind of dismiss this guy fairly quickly because they don't believe that he ever visited the Adelaide area.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one person who came forward that said that he had mentioned seeing a place called the Adelaide Festival Center being built, and that was being built around the time that the girls went missing.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, as I say the girls, I'm sorry, the all three children.
Mm-hmm.
However, unfortunately, nothing ever really panned out for that. And and the other thing about that makes people think it wasn't him is that he was actually 53 when the Beaumont children went missing. So unless he looks really young, it's unlikely that it was actually him.
Right, yeah, that's a big stretch.
Right. And yeah, and it's tough because, I don't think I look as old as I am, but I don't think I could pass for, 20 years younger than I am.
Right, yeah. That's hard to do.
So the next suspect is a man by the name of James O'Neill, who in 1975 was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of a 9-year-old boy in Tasmania. It's reported that he had previously told a Kimberley station owner and several other acquaintances that what he claimed to have been responsible for the Beaumont disappearances. So it's another person
Okay,
who's
who are these people coming forward way later? If a man tells you that he murdered children,
right. Yeah, do
why
something
are we
about it.
not do immediately? Like, and if you're gonna keep it to yourself,
Then
why are you why are you keeping it to yourself for that long? I feel like either you take it to the grave or you tell it immediately. It's weird.
exactly. It's very weird. Unfortunately, though, they didn't come forward sooner. Although we're going to go into because they do investigate him eventually. I mean, right here.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll go into it, but like, yeah, I don't understand why people hold off on those things because you're right. Like, it would be tough for me to like throw one of my best friends to the police like that. So, like you said, I'm either going to do it right away or I'm not going to do it at all.
Mm-hmm.
In 2006, O'Neill lost an injunction in the High Court of Australia to stop a broadcast of an ABC documentary called The Fisherman, which attempted to link him to the Beaumont case.
Oh, interesting.
So, former Victorian detective Gordon Davey spent 3 years speaking to O'Neill to win his confidence before filming him for the documentary. Davey said that although there was no evidence to link O'Neill to the Beaumont case, he was persuaded that O'Neill was to blame.
Interesting.
Well, this is the part where he takes it as his evidence, like what convinced him. He said, quote, I asked him about the Beaumonts and he said, I couldn't have done it. I was in Melbourne at that time, which he says wasn't a denial.
That is Nope, I ain't sold.
Yeah, it's hard to buy into that one. Later, if when he was asked again if he murdered the children, O'Neill replied, "Look, on legal advice, I'm not going to say where I was or when I was there." So he's being evasive, but I don't think that means he
Hmm.
did it.
That's certainly not beyond a shadow of a doubt.
No, absolutely not. So, although O'Neill claims to have never visited the city of Adelaide, his work in the opal industry at the time required him to frequently visit a place called Cobber Petty, which would have required him to pass through Adelaide.
Okay.
So, Davy suspected O'Neill was involved, possibly involved in the Adelaide Oval arena abductions as well. But
Mm-hmm.
the police did interview O'Neill, but they discounted him as a suspect in the Beaumont case, which at that point, like everything there is very almost, it's not even circumstantial, it's conspiracy level kind of, like
Mm-hmm.
I don't buy it.
Yeah, it's not enough to even warrant more. Yeah.
No,
It's
not
kind of
at all.
nothing.
But I wanted to include it because we are covering all the big the ones that the police actually really looked into.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one is a man by the name of Derek Percy. He was a convicted child killer, and he is Victoria's longest serving prisoner.
Okay.
And it was suggested in an article in the Melbourne's The Age in 2007 that he may be a suspect in the Beaumont's disappearance.
Mm-hmm.
So the Age alleged that evidence gathered by cold case investigators indicated that Percy was a likely suspect for a number of unsolved child murders, including the Beaumont children. His insanity plea in the 1969 murder of a girl named Yvonne Toohey was at least partly based on his supposed suffering a psychological condition that prevented him from remembering the details of his actions.
Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
that's convenient, huh?
Selective amnesia. Yeah.
Yep.
You know, I can't say I've been through extreme stressful situations, like extreme traumatic things, but I've never lost time.
No.
Never. Yeah, never.
I
I've
mean,
never.
if I was wasted beyond belief and blackout drunk, yes, but that's the only circumstance.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, maybe I've never been that bad, but I mean, I've just never lost time. So the idea of like I did that, I don't remember doing that. I just, I mean, unless we're talking something minor, like, oh, did I put that dish in the sink? I'm sorry. Like, like it doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
I don't know. He was supposed to have indicated that he believed he might have killed the Beaumont children as he was in the area at the time, but had no recollection of actually doing so.
Interesting.
So to me, this almost sounds like, I don't know if he was interrogated by police at this point, but those really super marathon long interrogations that they do that just wear people down.
Yeah, and like make people admit to things they never did.
That's what that sounds like to me.
Yeah, where he's like, all right, if you'll leave me alone, sure, I did it. I'm already in prison for life.
Right. Yeah. I just imagine sitting there going, I don't remember ever doing it, but maybe I did. Like it's just so fucked up. But
Yeah.
on August 30th of 2007, the Victoria police successfully applied for permission to actually interrogate Percy in relation to the Beaumont case. In 1966, though, Percy was only 17.
That's not passing for 35.
No, not at all. I don't care. You would have to be the world's like worst drug addict to look like you're
Yeah, to look that
35.
bad. Yeah.
So it was also unknown whether Percy would have had a car at that time. While, because I mean, the Beaumont suspect is presumed that that's how he got the kids away so quickly, or for maybe disposing bodies later. And being at 17 and whatever state of life he was in at that point, it's tough to know if he would have had access to a car to
Yeah,
have.
car seems prerequisite to murder.
We're going to get into it when we get to my favorite suspect. You'll see why I think that may not be the case.
Interesting. All right.
And Percy, of course, was in prison from 1969 until his death in 2013, which means that he could not have been a suspect in the Adelaide Oval abductions, but there's a possible connection to the Beaumont one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next suspect. This is why it reminds me so much of the Molly Bish case. There's so many suspects that kind of
Mm-hmm.
look like this. It blows my mind. So there was a man by the name of Alan Maxwell McIntyre. Now, he had been investigated by police and cleared of involvement in the Beaumont case, and gave a secondhand account to the Adelaide Advertiser that a man he had known in 1966, who by the time you get to 2015 was being sought by Southeast Asia countries in connection with child abuse incidents there,
Oh
had,
God.
had come to his home with the children's bodies in the trunk of his car.
Oh dear.
So let me try to break that down because I worded that funny. So basically, this guy in 2015, this guy Alan Maxwell McIntyre brought two bodies to his house, three bodies to his house in 1966 in the trunk of his car. Like, what would you do if I pulled up to your house and was like, "Hey, look in my trunk"?
There's three children's bodies in there.
That's crazy.
I would call the cops on you.
I would hope so. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't, no. But I mean, these aren't always the savoriest characters that we're starting with, so.
So McIntyre and his children, because somehow now his children saw the bodies in the trunk, mistook Arna's body for that of a boy because she had short hair. So they thought it was boys in the car, but they're thinking now it was the missing three. But of course, these people don't come forward until 2015.
Useless.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
have a mouthful of food.
It's all good. So the man that they claim came there was a man by the name of Alan Anthony Monroe, who was in his 70s when they were accusing him of this. And he had been a former scoutmaster who had pled guilty to 10 counts of child sex offenses dating back to 1962.
Jesus.
Yeah, like what? Like, how are you a scoutmaster?
Well,
And
but that's why you're a scoutmaster, unfortunately.
yeah, that's true. That's true. But I just it just blows my mind. Like, how is this person even still out and about if he's been I guess he didn't, maybe he pled guilty to all 10 when he got caught, but either way. So for those crimes, do you want to take a guess at how many years they gave him for those crimes?
For 10 counts of child sexual abuse.
Correct.
Did he serve any time?
He did.
All right, maybe 6 years.
He was sentenced to 10 years
Oh,
imprisonment with a non-parole period, meaning he has to serve a minimum of 5 years and 5 months.
yep. Less than
Yeah,
a year per person's life he ruined. That sounds appropriate.
horrible,
Horrible.
horrible. So at the time of his trial, he would have been eligible for release in 2022 because, of course, he was caught in 2017. In 2017, the Adelaide detectives were given a copy of a child's diary written in 1966, which allegedly places Monroe, this guy here, in the vicinity of the Glenelg Beach at the time of the Beaumont disappearances.
Hmm.
He was convicted of abusing several children, including one of McIntyre's sons, the guy who he brought the car to.
Jesus Christ. And
Right.
ugh.
And one of McIntyre's sons was one of the people that contributed to this diary.
Oh, so it's like a multi-kid diary?
I guess there's no
Interesting.
real information on the diary, so at least none that I dug deep into.
Weird.
He had previously been investigated by police, but they found that there was no evidence involved in showing that his involvement with the Beaumont case.
Mm-hmm.
So they just kind of stopped investigating until, of course, 2015 when all that happened.
Right.
But yeah, so he's probably, I haven't looked this up. I should have looked it up. I don't know if he's still alive now or if he's even still in prison. I'm going to guess he's not alive anymore.
I hope so.
You hope he's not?
I hope he's rotting in hell, or I hope there's hell that he's rotting in.
Agreed. Yeah, he definitely deserves a lot worse than what he got so far.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are on to the last and my favorite suspect for this. And I mentioned his name earlier. His name is Harry Phipps.
Yep. Okay, so this is the guy with the factory.
Correct.
Okay.
So Harry Phipps raped and sodomized a 13-year-old schoolgirl across from his Castalife factory in North Plimpton in the 1970s.
Oof.
She had
That's
been,
awful.
yeah, she had been interviewed and even filmed by the police, the investigators, and had been deemed truthful, meaning that they didn't doubt what she was saying, which,
Oh,
as we know, I mean, it's funny how many times that comes up. You're going to hear this a lot. Deemed truthful. Like, why is the initial assumption that they're not truthful?
you know why.
I know why. Yes, it's part of the whole, reason we have like the Me Too movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really sad.
It is. But I mean, it goes to show how reliable her testimony was if she was believed. Like
Correct.
especially in this era that she came and she was believed immediately and they looked at her and they weren't questioning her at all.
Yeah,
That says something.
yeah. So in 2019, another individual came forward accusing Phipps and others of sexual abuse inside that factory, and they were all minors.
Ooh.
And this person was deemed to be truthful by the police as well. Now, Hayden Phipps, Harry's oldest son, he accuses his father of sexual abuse and sodomy.
Oh,
And he
that's
claimed,
awful.
yeah,
His son.
his own son. And it
Oh,
started approximately around the age of 3.
oh my God.
Yeah. So,
Oh,
as you can imagine, his son obviously had quite a childhood.
oh, my heart breaks for him. That is beyond awful.
Now, Hayden was 15 in 1966 when the Beaumont children went missing. He came forward to police and said that he saw those kids with his father go into his house the day they went missing.
Oh God.
During an interview
And sorry, when did he come forward again?
years later when he was an
Years
adult.
later.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
it's never, they never come forward right away, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But he said he saw his father talking to 3 children. They went into the house. He was in like a almost like a second, like an off, like a shed or something that's off to the side of the house, like a work
Mm-hmm.
area. He was in there when he saw the children enter the house with his father. And he went inside soon after, but the front door was open and everyone was gone. So he doesn't actually know what happened after that.
Mm-hmm.
And just like everything else, the statement that he gave to police, and all their experts, he was deemed to be truthful. It's kind of weird that
Hmm.
they say it that way, but
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like I haven't really heard that before, but
well, again, it's Australia, and maybe it's a different police station because it's just, yeah. But Harry Phipps does fit the description of the man seen at the beach with the kids. He was really well known in the community. He was an upstanding citizen. Everyone kind of, he had some degree of power, within the politics of the city.
mm-hmm.
So it's possible that the kids recognized him just in general, and maybe that's why they trusted him if he is actually the man that was playing with
Weird that
them.
the kids would recognize him, but none of those people that
Yeah, the people that saw him playing with the kids. So
right,
maybe,
that they yeah, it's just interesting.
I mean, it may not be him. Like, who knows? But
Mm-hmm.
he does also fit the age range of the man seen with Jane, Arna, and Grant. Jane was given that £1 note that she went and bought the pies with, the sweets with.
Mm-hmm.
Harry Phipps was known to give out £1 notes back in the 60s. He was well known. That was like his big thing. He would tip people. He'd be like, here you go. And he'd give them a £1 note. Like that was something that he was well known for. And the fact that the girl went in with a £1 note is hugely telling in my mind.
Yeah, that's an awfully specific thing to be named known for.
Yes, exactly. And his house was approximately 300 yards from Collie Reserve, where the man was seen playing with the children. That little park, he was literally 300 yards from that park.
Hmm. Sus.
Yep, and he lived less than 200 yards from the bakery where the kids were seen going in. And there's
Mm-hmm.
and there's speculation that that's why the kids went in alone, because he may have been recognized by the staff there, so he didn't go in with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in the neighborhood and it makes sense. They could have even been introduced to the kids earlier because he lives so close to the beach.
yeah, he could easily have interacted with them, God knows how many times. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Interestingly enough, that book I talked about that I'm going to buy about this case called The Satin Man. The
Mm-hmm.
Satin Man is Harry Phipps.
Gotcha.
And what I'm about to say now is why that book is named what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So he was basically considered a sexual deviant because he enjoyed wearing women's satin garments, brightly colored dresses and pajamas and what have you. And he would wear them like this frilly material, and he would become sexually aroused by the feeling of it on his body to the point of ejaculation.
Okay, that's, I guess not the weirdest kink in the world, but it's a little
No,
odd.
but for 1966 Australia,
Well,
I'm
I'm sure
gonna
it was very taboo to them. Yeah.
yes, yeah. By today's standards, we're like, okay, do your thing, you
I'm
go,
like
girl.
I'm like, yes, and
Yeah,
like
I know, but you got to remember the time.
right, right, right. All things in cultural context.
Now, his son, Hayden, on occasions, he was found by the managers of like the apartments where they lived. Hayden, the son, was found lying face up on the lawn late at night, sobbing, and he was wearing women's clothing with lipstick smeared across his face.
Oh,
And they were always kind of saying that it was something was eating at this kid, but they could never really put their finger on
oh,
it.
God.
So yeah, so that's yeah,
Oh.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry for the kid. That's so, so horrible.
Yeah, I guess in a lot of ways I was fortunate that I didn't have to directly deal with that kind of abuse, although a lot of my family members did. But yeah, I don't know what I would have done. But again, I think we've said this in the past. I was so outspoken and combative that if someone tried doing something like that to me, like putting me in a dress, I'd have died before. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I'm not saying anything about this kid. Like obviously it's his father, and what power did he really have?
Right. 100%. Oh, poor kid.
Now this next part, this upsets me probably even more than what this kid went through with that last part. So the Archbishop of Adelaide's Anglican Church, named John Hepworth, he knew as early as the 1950s that Harry Phipps was kind of running in a sort of pedophile kind of direction and didn't do anything or say
And
anything.
like, so he would have been like in his like 20s.
No, no, they were talking Harry Phipps is the father. Yeah, so
Yeah,
he
yeah,
would
yeah.
have been in his 20s. You're right. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
So he knew as early as this guy in his 20s that he was kind of going down that path.
yeah.
And apparently there was an altar boy that had been abused back then. And he had spoken to a royal commission about his child abuse,
hmm
but nothing was ever really done about it.
So like probably this archbishop was, a child abuser and then was covering up others or thought that, this person confessed to me and I should be telling them to pray, not calling the police.
Yeah, and or the problem with the church, especially back then, is they were just kind of moving these abusers to do new places. They didn't want to smear their reputation.
100%, 100%.
Yeah, there's a case I think I may cover in the future directly involving that very thing.
hmm
But it's a doozy, and it's it's going to be one of those heavy ones like the Sylvia Likens case, where it's just yeah,
It's just absolutely brutal. And I mean, if it's going to be on this show, I mean, I assume it includes murder.
of course.
That's even darker, like starting with child abuse and I didn't know of any murders related to like the kind of famous ones in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, this one is I had never heard of it until a couple of years ago, and it was one of those stories that the further you dug in, the crazier it got. And the sad part is you would like to think it reached a point where it was like, all right, I don't believe this anymore. It's bullshit. And then you're like, holy shit. Like it's that bad. So I think I'm gonna have to, now that we're
Yeah,
talking
I mean,
about
it
it,
sounds definitely sounds like an interesting case.
yeah, we're gonna be covering it soon. That's been decided. So, and then the last piece for Harry Phipps here was what we talked about, that he paid two boys to dig a hole in his ground and didn't tell them what it was for. And yeah, unfortunately, So far, nothing has come of that. So Harry Phipps is my number one pick.
Yeah, so where is he these days?
Oh, I think he's dead. Yeah, I think unfortunately, yeah, I don't have any information on where he is right now, but I do think he's dead. In fact, while we're talking, I'm going to do a quick search because I should have had that information.
Yeah, that's always my first question is like, is he dead? Can we fuck him up? Like,
No, he died in 2004.
oh,
So he died even before those other people came forward, which again makes sense because when you think about why certain things are kept secret, it's because there's someone powerful that's still alive.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, like if you think about, by the time you heard bad things about, say Bill Cosby, no one spoke anything bad about Bill Cosby before his career started to just kind of fade away, you know?
yeah, yeah. Once he was starting to become less relevant.
Right. And the same is true of what's his name? Weinstein, like he
Hmm.
was still kind of powerful, but he wasn't quite what he had been. So typically you don't hear about the bad things until they're no longer a threat.
Right, which makes sense from the point of view of the victims. So,
Right. And yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's funny because when I think about like say the Kennedy assassination, let's say there's a deeper conspiracy and it wasn't just Lee Harvey Oswald, everyone that knows the truth has to be dead by now because at this point there's no one left alive that's powerful enough to stop you from speaking out. So they would have spoken out by now.
true, true.
So therefore the assumption is that we either know the truth or as close to the truth as we're ever going to know, or everyone who knows the truth was killed a long time ago.
Yeah, true, true, true.
So basically, now we're left with the legacy of what this case kind of brought up. This was, as I said before, it was one of the largest police investigations in Australia criminal history and remains probably Australia's most infamous cold case, even after we're reaching 60 years now.
Yeah.
In January of 2018, the premier of the, wow, hold on. How did I word that? The Premier of South Australia, Jay Witherill. Oh, okay. I forgot it's
You
a
good?
title. It's a title. I was thinking like the premiere of this movie.
Oh, but it like he's like the premier, like the president or whatever.
Correct. Yes. So in January of 2018, the Premier of South Australia, Jay Wetherill, said that South Australia police had never given up on the case and that they have a quote, a policy that no murder investigation ends up in a closed file. Well, that's a great
Wow.
sentiment. Yeah, well, it's a great sentiment.
Yeah.
Like, how much resources are they really still putting into it is the real question.
Right, like you just don't close files.
Correct. Oh, great. It's still sitting open under 100 other unclosed files.
Exactly.
The state government also continues to maintain a $1 million reward for information relating to their disappearance. So there's
Wow.
still $1 million that you could make if anyone has any idea. So you'd think that after all this time, someone would come forward, but you know,
Yeah, that just means there's probably no one. I mean, definitely sounds like this Satin Man is a
yeah, a pretty big expose. Yeah.
yeah, that I mean it makes sense and it's probably that, but yeah, there's just no way we'll ever know and there's also no way there'd be consequences. So does it
Yeah.
matter, you know? I
Yeah.
mean, like are their parents just still alive?
Well, I'm going to get to that at the end.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
just always seeing ahead of you.
Yeah. You're again psychic. We got to send you over there. What are we doing?
Oh my God, send me to Australia.
So a lot of people believe that the kidnapping of the Beaumont children was the kind of a significant event in the evolution of Australian society. Basically, after that, the way people supervised their children on a daily basis changed, which
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. I mean, it was kind of like the death of innocence there
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
At the
Scared
time,
straight.
yeah, at the time, the public never even suggested that children shouldn't be allowed to travel down the road to the beach without their parents. So, that changed quite a bit. So,
Mm-hmm.
um,
That's wild.
yeah, so the regular and widespread attention of this case and its significance to Australian criminal history and the fact that the mystery of their disappearance has never been explained has led to the story constantly being revisited by the media, which of course caused their parents a lot of pain and heartache.
Years and years and years. That's so much pain and always being resurfaced. That's awful.
Yeah, so in 1990, there was a moment where one of the newspaper publishers posted a story with computer generated photos of how the kids would look that day.
Oh, that's hard for the parents to look at.
Yeah, so suddenly, they're your kids kind of rendered as grown-ups on the
Mm.
in the newspaper. So their parents really had a horrible time afterwards. They did remain at their home in Somerton Park because Nancy felt that if the kids ever did return, she wanted to be home when they got there, which makes sense.
Oh,
Because where
yeah.
else would they go? Because they never gave up hope that they were alive. Over the years, as new leads and new theories emerged, the Beaumonts cooperated fully in exploring every possibility, whether it was claims that the children had been abducted by a religious cult and were, living in either New Zealand, Melbourne, Tasmania. They've heard it all. The pictures that I talked about, they were published against their wishes,
Oh, that's fucked up.
Yeah, but that did create like a kind of a wave of public sympathy from the community, which was, kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, what does that do for them though?
Right. They would eventually divorce and live separately, having resolved to live their final years away from public attention, which makes
Can't
sense.
blame them. Yep.
They did eventually sell their home, and the South Australian police did at the time retain their information of all their new addresses in case anything new came up. They could still reach out to them.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, it was reported that they accepted the truth of their children's disappearance, that they may never be recovered or discovered.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy died in Adelaide on September 16th, 2019, in a nursing home at the age of 92. And
Oh.
their father, Grant Jim Beaumont, died in Adelaide on April 9th, 2023.
Oh,
Yeah, just recently. At the
yeah,
age
like a few weeks ago.
Yeah, at the age of 97. Crazy, right?
That's, I mean, they're both living a really long time. That's a long and sad life to
I
have
was
just lost your children.
And not just like one of your children, all of your children.
Every single one of them all at the same time.
Like,
So awful.
I don't even want to, like, you think about it, because like you were just saying, one of them just died a couple of weeks ago. The other one was just a few years ago. They lived a long time never knowing. And just
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the crazy story of the Beaumont children from Adelaide, Australia.
What a sad tale.
Yeah, it's horribly sad, and it's disappointing in that we don't know what happened, and we
Yeah,
probably will
it's,
never know.
I mean, at this point, probably not. And it's not bringing any closure to the family because the family is no longer alive. So
Yeah.
even
It
if we were to find out what really happened, it's what does it mean?
it just answers the world's curiosity at this point,
Right.
you know.
Which, like, yeah.
It's like the episode we did last week, which you weren't a part of. It's like the Frog Boys. It's so hard when the answers when it's, especially if someone's actively avoiding giving you the answers, you
Oh,
know.
yeah, that's awful.
And so like it's hard when you think the answer should be right there, and yet like I'm not saying that we should expect murderers and child abductors or whatever to come forward and confess their crimes. Like that's no, that's never really going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But it would still be nice to have closure for the family.
Yeah, that's really what I think is the saddest part of us all is that they lose their children and they never get to find out what happened. They never even get to, have peace and make closure with their children being dead because they don't know that they are.
Right.
And then
And
they spend their whole life without that closure.
there's a small chance that they aren't dead. I mean, it's very, very, very small, but
Yeah.
they were young enough, or at least some of them were young enough to have been convinced that that what they knew of their lives before that moment was just all in their head.
Right, like abducted and put in a bunker type situation.
Yeah, abducted, brought to a new country. Who knows? I mean, the 9-year-old, is going to be the hardest one. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm speculating here, but like, but you've seen, like, I've heard other cases where children didn't even know they weren't who they thought they were.
Right. That makes sense. It's
Yeah,
plausible.
yeah. So it has happened. It's just unlikely in this case because there were three of them. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
yeah,
they're young enough that that would be traumatic. So,
yeah. I can't even imagine. So likely they're unfortunately they're probably not with us anymore. Which is why, again, this being a murder podcast, I feel comfortable enough to say, yeah, they were probably murdered, and we can tell that
hmm.
story. You know.
Yeah.
I once again I feel like I'm stretching the boundaries of what we should be able to do on this show.
It's our show. We could talk about what we want.
That's true, but we should have some guidelines.
It's fair.
You can't do a pottery podcast.
Murder pottery. You have you
Mm,
considered?
yeah, it was a very good niche, mate, right there. Maybe
I don't think there's a podcast about that.
probably not. Now I'm gonna have to see if there's a case about it.
Oh man, we'll have to look it up.
That would be really weird. And in fact, if I find one, you're presenting it.
All right, sick, sick.
All right. So that brings us to the end. Thanks everyone for listening to Unsung Murder Ballads. Come see us on our Instagram page. Give us a comment and some likes. Review us on Spotify. We'd love to hear from you guys. If you have case suggestions, let us know. But yeah, I'm Janice Dead,
And I'm Joyous Dead.
and we'll see you next week.